Hey everyone, thanks for watching this for fun or painting along with me. Today we're going to do a painting of lily pads. But before we do, a quick little lesson on perspective. So let's go. Okay, I will begin by drawing a horizon line across the canvas. Then I'm going to draw some railroad tracks because railroad tracks really illustrate perspective well. So first I'm drawing the rails, which are parallel, but as they go into the distance, they get closer and closer together. Now I'm drawing the ties, which would also get closer and closer together the further they go into the distance. And you may say, why am I doing this? Well, you'll see when we start to draw lily pads, because they do the same thing. As they go into the distance, they get smaller and smaller. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by sketching some lily pads. Thinking of the railroad track, obviously lily pads are not perfectly lined up, but just for the drawing, see how they get smaller and smaller? Okay, let's do our sketch now for our painting. Horizon line. I'm just going to draw various lily pads here and there. Now lily pads can be small or large. Sometimes they're on top of each other, underneath other lily pads, so they're not perfectly identical as they go into the distance, but they gradually will be getting smaller, even though their sizes vary. All right, going over here. Now I'm drawing just kind of a line of what will be some algae or something like that. More lily pads. Now these trees in the background and more algae or groups of water lilies in the distance. Now water lilies often have a V-shaped opening, as you can see I'm drawing. And I like that because it's almost like an abstract painting. Now we'll start to work on the sky using Alizarin Crimson and Titanium White to make a pinkish color. So you can see I'm blending Alizarin Crimson and Titanium White, make a nice pinkish tone for the sky. Begin to fill that in. And this is the undercoat, so it doesn't have to be complex. Don't have to try to paint clouds in it or anything like that. Next, I will use Pthalo Green blue shade, Pthalo Green blue shade, and fill in an undercoat of the trees in the background. Next, I will use Pthalo Green and Cadmium Yellow Medium and mix those together and start to work on the lily pads. Filling them in, I might make some of them a little darker, a little lighter. Be coming back and working much more on them later. But this is the undercoat, getting it all filled in. Pthalo Green, Cadmium Yellow Medium. Just getting it all filled in. Now let's use Pthalo Blue to begin filling in the waters around the lily pads. It is Pthalo Blue green shade. Just using one color, filling it around all the lily pads. This is, again, still part of the undercoat. Amazing how fast I can paint, isn't it? Now I will use a smaller brush to get into the little openings on the lily pads and some of the smaller areas. Also, you can see I'm doing a little bit of outlining of some of the lily pads with Pthalo Blue. Now I will use Alizarin Crimson, Titanium White, Pthalo Blue, and Yellow Ochre to work on the sky. I'm also using a smaller brush, about a 1/4 inch brush, and I'm going to be making smaller strokes using these colors. I'm mixing Alizarin Crimson and White, which, as I said before, makes pink, although I'm using more white this time to make clouds. And I'm just putting on little dabs, and you can see I'm making a few little holes in the trees. As I've said before, one of my profs in college used to say, whenever you paint trees, you need to leave little holes for the birds to fly through. So now I'm adding more white into the sky. Now I'm adding a little more dark Alizarin Crimson. Just adding variations. Now I'm going to mix a little white and Pthalo Blue to make a light blue color, which I will also begin to mix in with the sky here and there. So Pthalo Blue, White, Alizarin Crimson, mostly Pthalo Blue at this point with white. Some of the paint isn't quite dry yet, so they can all mix together a little bit. Now add a little bit of yellow ochre into the sky. Yellow ochre is a yellowish brown. Bring some more white down near the skyline at the bottom. Usually the sky would be a little bit lighter on the horizon line. So again, yellow ochre and white, Alizarin Crimson, yellow ochre, when you mix all 4 of these colors together, you can just get a whole variety of shades of color. Now I'm using a little bit of Pthalo Blue and white around the horizon line, below the trees. A little bit of light blue in the trees, a little bit of light blue here and there in the water. Underneath some of the lily pads, Pthalo Blue in the trees. Making some Pthalo Blue with white reflections in the water here and there. Just getting little dabs, little dots, sort of an impressionist approach. Now I'm using some more Pthalo Blue and white, a little darker blue, but making some outlines on some of the lily pads, outlining them in a medium blue. Now I'm going to add some Pthalo Green and burnt umber. Pthalo Green and burnt umber, which will make a very dark green, and I will be adding that along the bottom areas of the trees for the most part. Adding more to the bottom areas of the trees on the left, just making different parts of it stand out more. Adding some along the shoreline in the background, make that stand out a little more. Now I'm going to add white and yellow ochre to my Pthalo Green and burnt umber, and going to add some white to the Pthalo Green to make a light green. As you can see, white and Pthalo Green make the light shining down upon the tops of the trees and then some of the other areas where there would be trees and bushes. So a light green, also mixing yellow ochre in, make a yellowish green. Adding this in into some other areas as well. Now I'm going to mix Cadmium Yellow Medium, Pthalo Green, yellow ochre, burnt umber, and white together in various shades to work on the lily pads. So now you can see I'm mixing Pthalo Green and Cadmium Yellow. I am beginning to apply those in various shades to the lily pads, so I can add some yellow ochre in to make it a little different color, yellow ochre and white here. Because I want to create a whole variety of shades of color on the lily pads. So I'm just going to be adding different variations, mixing these colors together. Some lighter colors in the background. Now you can see I've added burnt sienna or reddish brown to my palette. And I'm going to use that to begin to paint some grasses or reeds that would be growing up in this pond of lily pads. So I'm going to do a lot of reeds and grasses. Swiping up from the bottom mostly, using a thin brush. You can see I'm just putting them in all over the place. I'm mixing yellow and yellow ochre. Got a very thin brush. So I'm mixing some light green reeds in and some yellowish reeds. I'm just mixing in a variety of colors. Yellow, light green, yellow ochre, burnt sienna. You can see I'm using this very fine brush and I'm sweeping from the bottom upward on my strokes. And the reeds in the foreground will be taller, of course, than those in the background. Lots and lots of tiny strokes. Little tiny dabs, which is my impressionist style of painting. Now some little horizontal strokes, some lighter areas touched into the trees. Now using yellow ochre, burnt sienna, phthalo green, cadmium yellow, just continue to work on the lily pads, just adding more detail, coming in between some of the reeds, sharpening them up, just going over the whole canvas with various shades of green. Add some more white to my greens. Just keep adding various shades of light green throughout the painting. Lots of tiny little dabs, tiny little strokes, adding it lighter green, especially near the horizon line as it's in the background. So I'm continuing to add little dabs of yellow-green all over the whole painting. Just continuing to work on the whole painting, not focusing on any one particular area, adding some lighter dabs in the background, lightening up some of the tops of the trees a little bit more. Now I'm going to use Pthalo Blue, Burnt Umber, Pthalo Green, and White for some more work on the painting. I'm going to start off with Pthalo Blue, just straight Pthalo Blue, and add that into various sections of the water. One of the things I'll do with it is make some of the reeds thinner, come in along the edges of the reeds, make them thinner. Just adding more to the water of the picture. Make sure that its paint is nice and thick on there. Adding a lot of little dabs. Lots of little dabs. Now mix a little bit of Pthalo Blue and Burnt Umber, which makes a really dark shade, and sharpen up some more of the areas in the water. Sharpen up a couple of the openings. Now mix white and Pthalo Green. Make a light green, add a little blue in there. So blue, green, and white, and I'm coming along the edges of some of the lily pads, and I'm also making little horizontal lines of ripples in the water, just again to create more interest and variety in the water. It's not just solid dark blue. Coming across in the background, in the middle of the painting. So you can see the Pthalo Green at the bottom. white. And I'm just continuing to make more and more little additions to make it more and more detailed. Continuing to work on some of the outlines of the lily pads. So the outlines are not all the same color. Use various shades for the outlines. Add some green and blue into the reeds. So you can see I'm adding just lots of tiny little strokes of the light blue, light green. Now I'm going to add burnt sienna and white and mix them together to make a light reddish brown, and I'll add that all over the painting in different sections. Just continuing to vary the colors. Adding some light reddish brown up near the skyline would reflect a little bit more of the brightness of the sky up near the horizon line. Now I'm using this reddish brown and burnt sienna and white to just continue to work on the reeds. So I'm using a very small brush and burnt sienna. Just add lots of tiny little details to the edges in the background. Little bits of detail to some of the edges of the lily pads in the foreground with just a very fine brush and burnt sienna. I've got to admit, burnt sienna is one of my favorite colors. Add a little bit more white and burnt sienna together. Add it to this lily pad over on the right, just to give more variation in the colors of the lily pads. Now I'm using burnt sienna, yellow, to create another color variation. Brighten up some of these lily pads, make them pop a little more. So my initial painting had just basically one simple shade of green for all the lily pads, but you can see as I have continued to work on it, I keep adding more variations to it. Now I've got my burnt umber, phthalo blue, white, and green again. Going back to work some more in the water, defining some of the reeds a little more. So you can see in this later phase, I'm just really adding little bits of detail. Tiny little dabs of paint. And there you have it. Finished painting. Thanks for watching this, and thank you if you painted along with me. Hope you enjoyed the whole process, and hope to do more of these in the future. Thanks again.